Hey guys, chapter 23, last chapter. Jonas felt more and more certain that the destination lay ahead of him, very near now in the night that was approaching. None of his senses confirmed it, and he saw nothing ahead except for endless ribbon of road unfolding in twisting narrow curves. He heard no sound ahead, yet he felt it. He felt that elsewhere was not far away, but he had little hope that the world would be able to reach it. Excuse me, but he had little hope left that he would be able to reach it. His hope diminished further when the sharp, cold air began to blur and thicken with swirling white. Gabriel, wrapped in his inadequate blanket, was hunched, shivering, and silent in his little seat. Jonas stopped the bike wearily, lifted the child down, and realized with heartbreak how cold and weak Gabe had become. Standing in the freezing mound that was thickening around his numb feet, Jonas opened his own tunic, held Gabriel to his bare chest, and tied the torn and dirty blanket around them both. Gabriel moved feebly against him and whimpered briefly into the silence that surrounded them. Dimly, from the nearly forgotten perception as blurred as substance itself, Jonas recalled what the whiteness was. It's called snow, Gabe, Jonas whispered. Snowflakes. They fall down from the sky and they're very beautiful. There was no response from the child who had once been so curious and alert. Jonas looked down through the dusk at the little head against his chest. Gabriel's curly hair was matted and filthy, and there were tear stains outlined in the dirt on his pale cheeks. His eyes were closed, and as Jonas watched, a snowflake drifted down and was caught briefly for a moment's sparkle in the tiny, fluttering eyelashes. Wearily, he remounted his bicycle. A steep hill loomed ahead, and in best conditions, the hill would have been difficult, demanding ride. But now the rapidly deepening snow obscured the narrow road and made the ride impossible. His front wheel moved forward imperceptibly as he pushed on the pedals with his numb, exhausted legs. But the bicycle stopped. It would not move. He got off and let it drop sideways into the snow. For a moment, he thought how easy it would be to drop beside it himself, to let himself and Gabriel slide into the softness of the snow, the darkness of night, and the warm comfort of sleep. But he had not come this far. He must try to go on. The memories had fallen behind him now, escaping from his protection to return to the people of his community. Were there any left at all? Could he hold on to the last bit of warmth? Did he still have the strength to give? Could Gabriel still receive? He pressed his hands into Gabriel's back and he tried to remember sunshine. And for a moment, it seemed that nothing came to him, that his power had completely gone. And then it flickered suddenly when he felt tiny tongues of heat beginning to creep across and into the frozen feet and legs. He felt his face begin to glow and the tense, cold skin of his arms and hands relax. And for a fleeting second, he felt that he wanted to keep it for himself, to let himself bathe in sunlight, unburdened by anything or anyone else. But the moment passed and was followed by an urge, a need, a passionate yearning to share the warmth with the one person left for him to love. Aching from effort, he forced the memory of warmth into the thin, shivering body in his arms. Gabriel stirred, and for a moment they both were bathed in warmth and renewed strength as they stood hugging each other in the blinding snow. Jonas began to walk up the hill. The memory was agonizingly brief. He had trudged no more than a few yards through the night when it was gone and they were cold again. But his mind was alert now. Warming himself ever so briefly had shaken away the lethargy and the resignation and restored his will to survive. He began to walk faster on feet that he could no longer feel, but the hill was treacherously steep. He was impeded by the snow and his own lack of strength. He didn't make it very far before he stumbled and he fell forward. On his knees, unable to rise, Jonas tried a second time. His consciousness grasped at a wisp of another warm memory and tried desperately to hold it there, to enlarge it, to pass it to Gabriel. His spirits and strength lifted with momentarily warmth, and he stood. Again, Gabriel stirred against him as he began to climb, but the memory faded, leaving him colder than before. If only he had time to receive more warmth from the giver before he had escaped, maybe there would have been more left for him now. But there was no purpose in if onlys. His entire concentration had to be on moving his feet, warming Gabriel and himself, and going forward. He climbed, stopped, and warmed them both briefly again, with a tiny scrap of memory that seemed certainly to be all he had left. The top of the hill seemed so far away, and he did not know what lay beyond. There was nothing left to do but continue, and he trudged upwards. As he approached the summit of the hill at last, something began to happen. He was not warmer. If anything, he felt numb and more cold. He was not less exhausted. On the contrary, his steps were laden, and he could barely move his freezing, tired legs. But he began, suddenly, to feel happy. He began to recall happy times. He remembered his parents and his sister. He remembered his friends, Asher and Fiona. He remembered the giver. Memories of joy flooded through him suddenly, and he reached a place where the hill crested, and he could feel the ground under his snow-covered feet become level. It would not be uphill anymore. "We're almost there, Gabriel," he whispered, feeling quite certain without knowing why. "I remember this place, Gabe." And it was true, but it was not grasping of a thin and burdensome recollection. This was different. This was something that he could keep. It was a memory of his own. He hugged Gabriel and rubbed him briskly, warming him to keep him alive. The wind was bitterly cold, and the snow was swirling, blurring his vision. But somewhere ahead, through the blinding storm, he knew there was warmth and light. Using his final strength and special knowledge that was deep inside him, Jonas found the sled that was waiting for him at the top of the hill, and numbly his hands fumbled for the rope. He settled himself on the sled and hugged Gabe close. The hill was steep, the snow was powder and soft, and he knew this time that there would be no ice, no fall, no pain. Inside his freezing body, his heart surged with hope. They started down. Jonas felt himself losing consciousness, and with his whole being, willed himself to stay upright atop the sled, clutching to Gabriel, keeping him safe. The runners sliced through the snow, and the wind whipped at his face as they sped in a straight line through the incision that seemed to lead to the final destination. The place he had always felt was waiting, the elsewhere that held the future and their past. He forced his eyes open as they went downward, sliding, and all once in a while he could see lights, and he recognized them now. He knew that they were shining through the windows of the rooms, that they were red, blue, yellow lights that twinkled from trees and places where families created and kept memories, where they were celebrated love. Downward, faster. Suddenly he was aware with certainty and joy that below, ahead, they were waiting for him, and that they would be waiting too for the baby. And for the first time, he heard something that he knew to be music. He heard people singing. And behind him, across vast distances of space and time from the place that he left, he thought he heard music too. But perhaps it was only an echo. Questions for chapter 23, guys. Here we go. What was the weather like? What was it like whenever he was walking up the mountain? Number 2, what happened to his bicycle? And number 3, how does the book end? Did you like it? Why? Why not? What do you think? Did you like the ending? Thanks for following along with the book, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. See you on the next book.